When I started this project, everyone at Rugged Ridge basically asked me to give them a rendering of what it's gonna look like. And I don't actually ever build off of a rendering because the few times I have, the end vehicle never looked like the rendering, so it was kind of a waste. This one is the exact same. In my head, my plan was to basically put the half cab kit on, cap the back, build a full flatbed on the back, and then do a custom aluminum cap, kind of like a overlandy truck. Now that I have it all mocked up, I don't like that idea at all. Now my plan is to basically just stretch the body and kind of make like a Jeep Avalanche kind of look-alike. So the whole fender will still be stretched out. I'm gonna keep the back half of the Jeep and just move the wheel well further back. And I have another crazy idea, and that is instead of capping underneath my half cab, I'm gonna make that a pass-through. So when you open the tailgate, put a hard tonneau on the top, we'll basically be able to slide items from the back up to the front. That's gonna give me a lot of storage, but more importantly, my plan now is I can sleep in the Jeep when I'm on Ultimate Adventure. Just fold one of the seats flat, my legs will go in the back, in the bed of the truck, we'll have a nice sleep. If it's cold, I can start the Jeep and put the heat on. If it's hot, I can start the Jeep and put the AC on. It's like owning an RV, but way cooler. At this point, this frame is ready to go back underneath the body. But honestly, there's a few things that are gonna be easier to tackle with just a rolling chassis and no body in the way. I've already done a couple of them. I installed a PSC hydraulic ram assist steering kit, and that's one of their heavy duty big bore boxes up there. That's gonna make turning the tires a lot easier, and a new power steering pump. That was just easier to do with the body out of the way. So a bunch of this other stuff's probably gonna be easier too. Things like bumpers, winch, skid plates, maybe even the suspension. On the front of this Jeep, I'm gonna use a Rugged Ridge HD stubby bumper. And I've used this bumper on a couple of builds, and I really like the narrow width of the bumper and the integrated tow hooks. It also has a winch plate that mounts the winch nice and low that doesn't impede airflow across the Jeep's radiator. The winch for this truck is a Rugged Ridge Trekker S10. That's a 10,000 pound winch with synthetic winch line. Winch has an IP68 waterproof solenoid motor and gearbox, so don't need to worry about it being outside in the weather. Has a 5.6 horsepower motor and a 3-stage planetary gear set that gives it a 216-to-1 gear reduction. Perfect to get us out of trouble on our trip. Whenever you stretch wheelbase on a Jeep, it's a good idea to protect the underbelly because the wheels are obviously further apart. So I'm adding a whole host of skid plates underneath this rig, all from Rugged Ridge, basically to protect the engine, transmission, transfer case whenever I'm off-road. The suspension on this Jeep is a whole new kit from Superlift. We basically have the prototype version of a long arm kit for the Jeep JK. Now that's really gonna help us out when we're off-road because the long arm, which actually means exactly that, the suspension arms are longer. It's gonna increase the articulation of our axles. It's gonna allow us to climb over bigger rocks. And since we stretched the wheelbase on this Jeep, we're gonna really benefit from that long arm suspension. The only issue is that this is the prototype kit. So they sent me with some pretty rough instructions on where things are gonna go. That's why I made the decision to go ahead and install all of this on the frame before I put the frame back underneath the Jeep body. That way I have full access to everything and I can see where everything's gonna go, because I'm probably gonna have to make a few modifications to make this work on this Jeep. Out you come, Mr. Rear Axle. This happens whenever you build a vehicle. I mean, I was all excited because I put the fuel tank back in and got it all hooked back up and put this cross member back in to align the bolt. And now that I'm doing this long arm kit, as I said before, it's a prototype kit. This is first time it's ever been installed. I gotta take that fuel tank back out so I can get the bracket cut off. And then on top of that, I spent all this time getting this exhaust extension piece put into place. And now that has to come back out because in order for the front long arm kit to work, all of this exhaust has to get redone because it gets in the way of the control arms. But that's the price of building vehicles. I'm just glad I didn't put the body back on already. That would have been bad. I'm glad it's still just a frame. Small fire over there. I put it out. All right, we're basically halfway through our second build session on this JK. So you can see it's still a bare frame, but we've got a lot done. Skid plates are all in, all the factory suspension has been cut off. I've gone ahead and installed the rear long arm superlift kit on the back. I did have to modify it a little bit because of the fact that we've stretched the frame, but nothing that is going to affect the performance of the suspension. I've actually already cycled it a bunch just to make sure everything clears and it looks great. It's just mocked up into place right now. And one thing that I do really like about this Superlift long arm kit is how they're doing the adjustments. They've got these adjusters built into one end of the arm, so the other end is fixed. And if you ever need to adjust it, you just have to loosen off the pinch bolts and turn this large nut. It'll actually make the link shorter or longer. I really like that. That's a pretty cool design. Once you get everything locked into place, you simply tighten the pinch bolts and it'll hold it good and secure. You don't have to worry about jam nuts loosening up with this. Now that the rear is all set up, I got to move on to the front, and that is a lot harder. Superlift long arm kit includes all the brackets needed to install the suspension, and even though this kit is a full bolt-on kit, I am welding these front brackets in place just like on the rear. This Jeep JK that we started with is already a Rubicon edition, so it's got a Dana 44 front and a Dana 44 rear. I do want to re-gear them, so the options I have are basically take the axles out, tear them down, put new gears in them, or I could replace them with some crate axles. Now, I'm going to do a crate axle in the front. It's a Dana replacement axle, and it seems kind of silly to replace a 44 with a 44, but there is some upgrades in that Dana 44. The JK 44 front, when Jeep first built it, they kind of shaved a lot of weight off that axle, so it does have some inherent weak points, specifically in the axle tubes and in the bracketry, whereas the aftermarket Dana 44 solves all those problems. So I can deal with any issues in that front axle by simply sliding a brand new front axle underneath the front of this Jeep. The Dana 44 crate axle uses the JK factory outers, so they need to be swapped onto our new axle along with a brake upgrade from Hawk Brakes. The Hawk brake kit includes their Talon rotors. Now these are made from G3000. Now, that's a superior automotive casting, and their cross-drilled design is there to optimize thermal efficiency, heat dissipation, strength, and improved wet braking. That's a big deal on a Jeep when you're running trails. Also, by adding the light truck and SUV disc brake pads, now this just improves stopping power all around and fade resistance. This brake upgrade is perfect when you add larger wheels and tires like we have to our Jeep. Now I've basically completed the rolling chassis. You know, it's got new suspension underneath it. It is ready to roll back underneath the Jeep body for the next step in the process. This was honestly probably the hardest way to install the suspension system, basically remove the frame from the vehicle, but in this case, it was the best decision. And now, once the body's back on, this rig is basically ready to roll. And it's a good thing because we are, you know, right around 20 days before we leave for Ultimate Adventure.